Hello and welcome to Trans Uncensored, the podcast where we don't even censor the swear words because we're just that naughty. I'm your host, Verity Ritchie, which is actually Latin for very itchy. This episode will include sexually explicit content, so if boobies and bottoms make you feel faint, this may not be the right podcast for you. Today's topic is sex and dating. Trans people tend to have all the regular challenges of dating, plus some special extra transgender ones. Today I'll be chatting with my dear friend Kitty. Welcome, Kitty.
Hello.
So Kitty, my first question is, what are you wearing?
I'm wearing a basic oversized black shirt and my high-waisted jeans.
That's so hot.
What are you wearing?
Oh, absolutely nothing at all.
Of course.
Just a fluorescent pink thong on my head. Okay, no, so Kitty.
Yes.
Do you find dating easy?
No.
No?
No. Yeah, like where do you meet people, right?
Well, where do you meet people?
I usually used social media, like social dating apps, like Grindr and Tinder, and what else is there?
How's
Her.
using... So you have Her and Grindr, so you have the lesbian dating app and the gay dating app.
Yeah.
That's the trans experience.
It is, isn't it? Yeah. Did you have them?
I had both. I've had both at various different times.
Yeah.
One has lots of talking and one has lots of dick pics.
Oh yeah, obviously.
I'll leave it up to the listener to guess which one.
I also try to find specific dating sites for just trans people, but I guess there aren't many. There's just one, and in Slovenia there's no usage of it, barely anyone uses it, and I feel like mostly people who fetishize trans people use it to catch a trans person or something.
Yeah, I feel like the function is really for horny cis men to find trans women to have sex with.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing, isn't it?
I feel like a lot of people, they don't distinguish between cross-dressing and someone who identifies as a trans person. I mean, sometimes if you're a assigned male at birth, a trans woman, and you like femme clothing, then that's, your thing. But not all of us like really femme things, skirts and flowers on them.
So the problem that you have is that men are expecting you to dress in a very particular way because you present yourself as a trans woman, but you don't look as feminine as they expect you to be as a trans woman.
Exactly. But I feel like they don't even acknowledge that I am a trans person, and they just feel like I would be up for their fantasy of cross-dressing, right? Like, hey, I want to have sex with you, but only if you wear women's lingerie. It's I'm not up for that, Maybe if my partner would ask me that, and if I would be in the mood to do that, sure, yes. But I feel so objectified if someone just asks me that.
Yeah, and I find it hard to even imagine that people would want to go beyond a hookup when they think of me in that kind of sexual fantasy kind of way.
Yeah.
I think before I transitioned, I could see hookups becoming something more, and it didn't bother me as much. But now I think, am I even a person to them? And I remember I've often said to guys, Like, would you be ashamed to be seen with me in person? One guy once said to me, no, as long as you pass. And I was like, okay.
Yeah. It's. I feel like a lot of people are also then afraid of us, or like maybe it's their own insecurities that they would seem as gay or something, since we wouldn't pass, and then that'd be like shit for them, I guess, or something. I don't know.
I think my two anxieties, my sort of binary gendered anxieties when it comes to dating, is that men will see me as a sex object and nothing more, and women will see me as, this is so fucked up to say, but like as a rapist, because there's this, like, I think it comes from radical feminism, this idea that trans women are just perverts, and so there's kind of this idea from both sides that trans women are hypersexual, and like the reason that we want to transition, the reason that we want to be the way we are is sexual.
Yeah, exactly. So dating men for me is kind of easier than dating women. I don't know, I feel like I'd invest so much more in dating women than in dating men. Because I feel like a lot of men just want to like hook up, kind of have sex, and then they get either bored of you or they don't care. With women, it's more about, having a connection. I don't find, at least in my experience, that they'd be up for sex like right away.
Yeah, I used to, my dating pool used to be much bigger when it came to women than it is now. I don't really know what it would be now. I mean, life is very different because I live in Slovenia now.
Yeah.
It used to be I was dating in Texas, and then I was dating in England, and now I live in Slovenia, and I have a long-term partnership, and we're polyamorous. But that changes the situation a lot, and I don't really know what it would be like if I didn't have a partner who was very much part of the same scene that I am, and we're very obviously together. I also don't know what Slovenian people are like when it comes to like flirting, to be honest. But I felt like I had a much larger dating pool. And when it came to women, like straight women were into me, and now straight women are not into me.
Yeah,
That's okay. I don't particularly miss straight women, but it's weird having that kind of demographic. Like, women has become a much smaller dating pool for me, and men has kind of become a larger dating pool, but it's kind of more unpleasant dating pool. I don't really want to date straight men, and so like the switch for me is now straight men are available, and that's not my favorite category of person. I know there are some nice ones out there somewhere, but I wouldn't place bets that I'll be finding them on Grindr or Tinder.
So I usually try to date bisexual men.
Yeah.
Because, then I feel like they'll recognize my gender, and everything will be kind of sorted out. However, I feel like a lot of bisexual men then also don't want to date a trans woman like me. So
I think you've talked to a lot of, I mean, from what I remember, you've been on a lot of dates with bi men who are not even out as bi.
Yeah, exactly. They're very closeted, and maybe that's an issue.
Yeah, I think like bi men who are out and have like experienced like same-sex relationships, I think that's a very different situation. Because if you're not out, then being with a trans person can be that process that can begin this process of being out for the first time and being targeted for the first time in a way you're not familiar with. So maybe that's what it is.
Yeah. Also, about straight women, like I'd love to date a straight woman, but would they want to date me? Like, hey, darling, actually, I'm trans, And she'd be like, what?
So one of the questions that we have for today is, do you have any thoughts on T40 trans relationships and exclusive trans dating? And what do you think the downside and advantage of being exclusively T40 is?
Yeah.
I mean, I think one downside would be that it's a much smaller dating pool.
Obviously, yeah, definitely a very way smaller dating pool, especially in Slovenia. I feel like it would be refreshing to date a trans person if you are trans, right? Because obviously gender wouldn't be an issue, I hope. And you could communicate with your partner about the same issues that you're going through, or like similar issues, right? So yeah, that would be quite rad. For me, I had this fear quite some time ago that like I'm not enough trans, and that by dating a trans person, I had this internalized transphobia issues, and I was like, what? Where is this coming now from?
What makes you feel like you're not trans enough?
I don't know, because maybe if I were to date someone who is in a transitioning, like medical transitioning, and I'm not, then it all kind of comes down to passing and how much in the binary system are you, right?
I think the experience of being trans is so hugely diverse.
It is.
That although it can be like I've dated quite a few trans people over the years, but like for instance, how long ago is that? Like 8 years ago, I was dating a guy who had like gone through medical transition all the way, social transition, and he was stealth, and I had gone through none of that. And so in that way, we couldn't connect over that. Whereas if I were to date him now, we actually could connect over that experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, and I find that sometimes with community in general, it like as someone who is non-binary, I for the listeners out there, I'm non-binary and I also consider myself a trans woman. I sometimes find that being non-binary, it's such a diverse group of people that it's quite hard to find connections over that. Like, I don't necessarily relate to everyone's experience because we just have such, and that's just, then non-binary is sort of the biggest pool of diversity, I think. So, yeah, so dating trans for trans exclusively. I would also, like, I might be biased because I am dating someone who's not trans. I mean, that's my long-term partner is not trans, but I feel that cutting off a significant part of the dating pool could be a mistake. I think there's a tendency to feel like we are safe with other trans people because they are sort of the good group and then cis people are the bad group. And I think when we kind of label one group very broadly like that, we tend to put the other group on a pedestal. And the fact is, trans people are still just people. And some are assholes, some are not assholes, some are just bad at communication, bad at dating. So, and it may be that a cis person doesn't know all the right terminology, all the right stuff to say right off the bat, but I think you could miss out on a really important relationship that could be really beautiful and really good for you if you cut cis people out. It's still hard. It's going to be hard no matter who you're dating.
Yes. But like any dating or like relationship is hard, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just, you have to communicate things so that both parties or like several parties, if you're in a polyamorous relationship, understand how you're feeling and what your needs are.
The next question is, when do I come out to a new person that I'm dating?
Right away. I'd say right away. I mean, I used to, so there's this one case, or maybe several, but I remember this one particular guy that I dated, and he was really sweet. He was, I didn't out myself as trans to him right away, right? We went on like 3 dates, and Slovenian, the Slovenian language is uses gender, right, in like grammatical gender, right? And I tried to avoid it. So sometimes I just referring to myself, I'd speak in English because then you can just avoid it, right? Or like I'd use silly sentences that really didn't make any sense, like future wise or like, tense wise. But I still could get the message across. And I did that for like 3 dates. And then this one time I commented, we were at this bar and I commented on this old grandma, and I said, hey, I'd love to look like her. She looks so cool, and I'd love to be a grandma someday. And his face just went blank, like quiet, like he's seen a ghost or something. And he's like, are you serious? And I'm like, yeah. What's wrong with that, right? And he's like, so you want to be a grandma specifically, like a female? And I was like, yeah. And then I said, I'm a trans woman. And he was speechless. He was just like, like I murdered him or something. I don't know. It passed like 5-10 minutes until he was able to speak again. And I was like, hey, are you all right? Did I say something wrong or something, right? So from then on, I feel like I always, either if dating via social media, I have it on my profile stated that I'm a trans woman, or if I meet people, I make sure, that the message gets across.
Yeah, I think there's this kind of, I think it depends where you are or how you've transitioned, if you're transitioning, when you're going to transition.
And how out you are to people, right? I guess.
Yeah, and how out you are, whether you want to come out immediately. I did date a trans person once where we went on a few dates before they told me they were trans, and they were um in the opposite situation to you, where they had like transitioned completely. So I didn't know their gender assigned at birth, um, and it didn't bother me in the slightest. We just got on with it, so to speak. I won't go into any more detail than that. Um, and I think a lot of people who are sort of living stealth, for lack of a better term, want to do that. Like, want to go on dates and not come out, and come out a little bit later, and sort of feel things out first before they come out. And that terrifies me. I just don't think I could do it. And I know that, like, I'm at a point in my life where I can pass. I can also not pass if I want to. And I think I could manage going on dates where the other person didn't know that I'm trans, but like the idea scares the crap out of me. I went on sort of I went out for coffee once a few years ago with with a lesbian who I don't think she knew I was trans, and I think she was kind of into me, and I was definitely into her, but like I just didn't tell her I was trans, and it just scared me. I was like, I was so distracted and so worried that this couldn't go any further, and like what happens when I come out, like, and it's such a huge deal that like I couldn't get beyond that. So I couldn't even get to a point where I thought, well, maybe something can come of this, because I was so focused on, God, I have to come out. When would I come out? Would I come out like when we're about to go to bed together, or do I come out now? Should I have already come out? But I'm a person with a lot of anxiety and a lot of social anxiety, so yeah, it depends. It depends on so many things. So we have absolutely no answer to this question. I would really think that like the vast majority of the time, it is a good idea to come out first, and to have it like on your dating profile to some degree, even if it's like a little bit subtle is probably helpful. And if it's not on your profile, then maybe when you start chatting with them, just say, I've seen people say like, so have you ever been with a trans girl before? You know, and then they're like, what?
Testing the waters, and yeah. I feel like, yeah, if you're not outed, or yeah, you're just like figuring out gender for yourself, then through talking to that person, through dates and stuff like that, I feel like you could tell them as well, like in a few dates, and hope for the best, right? Like hope that they're not like how this guy reacted.
Yeah, you got to be like, so do you watch Pose?
Yeah.
Do you like Orange is the New Black? Okay, next question. How do you prepare your parents for meeting your partner who is trans? So that they act nice and respectful towards your partner. And that says, it may just be my parents, but they tend to ask a lot of questions and be nosy, especially about LGBT plus topics. I think the nosy part is probably not a bad thing in this situation. I think some parents they'll hear the message that about something LGBT, and then they'll never want to talk about it again. And I think that's a problem. And that in some ways being nosy could be better, just because you get to answer questions, and maybe the questions are inappropriate, but then you get to explain like, well, this is not really appropriate, this can make people very uncomfortable, but also like give them details, you know, like if you were talking to a small child, you want to tell these things to kids, and I think a lot of parents, you know, adults just don't know about these things.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the majority is like cis and straight, right? The majority of our parents, and yeah, obviously all they ever dealt with, possibly the LGBT community, is by hearing about HIV and gay men, right? And they probably have no idea about other sexual identities and gender identities. So yeah, if they do ask, give them an answer. But also, how would I do it? I have no clue.
I think, like personally, my mum is just so. It's been so many years now, and she's so used to her children just being queer in unexpected ways that I think she would take it in her stride. Um, but like, obviously, you don't want to. It's maybe not necessary to out your partner if they pass. I guess is what it comes down to. Which some people, I mean, especially. Oh, it just depends though, because I wouldn't really care to like for my partner's mum to know that I'm non-binary, but I'm happy to go by she and her pronouns. But like if you want neutral pronouns, which is another issue in Slovene. But I think in Slovene, so you generally when you talk about yourself, you speak in feminine or masculine, and there really isn't another option. Even though if anyone out there wants to read Kvartir Transin 2, then we've made a selection of brand new neutral words. But they're not in common use yet. They're occasionally helpful. I feel like our friend group, at least, occasionally will use it with like stuff. But yeah, so one thing that I find interesting about Slovene is that I get to gender myself in a conversation with a new person, and that seems helpful to me. I mean, occasionally, very rarely now, but like it has happened in the past that people seem to be confused about my gender, and speaking in English doesn't clarify that at all, but speaking in Slovene can actually make that clearer, which is interesting. But I remember you've had trouble with that, haven't you? Where that didn't actually work out in your favor.
I have, you know, the opposite view on this, right? You kind of, if you're meeting new people and maybe you're unsure like where they stand on any sort of situation, really, and you do I use then the feminine grammatical gender or do I use the masculine one? Like, I'm always in doubt because, I mostly look like a man, right? Like, let's.
A very, very pretty man if you do.
Thank you. Actually, over the last year, a lot of people, like, if I go to the store or any sort of public place and people don't know me, they'll actually call me Miss. And I was like, I'm so happy when my actual gender gets recognized, but I'm also like, how do they read me as a woman even when I'm not trying to, Like, I don't put excessive amounts of makeup or even any makeup on me, or like I don't wear super femme clothes or something, right? So I just pass, and it's fun and nice, but yeah, I cannot always have that. So yeah, meeting new people, it's always a question of, how do I dress myself?
Well, I remember a story where you were speaking to someone in feminine and they thought you were speaking in the dual masculine case.
All right, yes. Because I was at this party and I made cake, and there was this person who never knew me, and it was our first time meeting each other, and I was like saying in feminine that I made this cake, like what's in it, blah blah blah, and that person just assumed that it was me and that friend doing the cake, right? Because in dual, it's the same ending than if I were to speak in feminine, right? The A letter. And that person just didn't get the message across. It was so ridiculous.
So you end up either being, in someone's eyes, a woman or actually like two men.
Of course, yes.
That's the two gender, that's a real binary.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so next we've got, what are some neutral terms that can be used instead of terms that are usually used when describing genitalia?
Oh my god.
Do you have any?
I don't actually. I just don't refer to my genitalia.
The pleasurable thing.
The
We
pleasure
made
bits.
we made up a word for the transine, like neutral words, right? Zgečkalo.
All right. Yes. Sure. If you make up new words, then yeah, obviously. But like, if you just use the existing ones, what would you use?
Of course, genitalia is a gender neutral word, so you can use that. But genitalia isn't like a sexy word, you
Yeah,
know?
no, it's not.
Like,
It's not.
and I feel like when you go neutral, you start to miss out on like, it's like hot terms. Because there's penis and vagina, right? But then there's cock and cunt, and like words that are like almost are kind of kinky to use, like the context in which you decide to refer to it as like your pussy or your cock. It's usually very sexual. Like the point of using those words is a sexy kind of feeling. And I think that's where it gets tricky. I mean, a lot of people will, so the clitoris, the shchigatalchik, and the penis, they are analogous,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Like they
yeah.
start off in the
Yeah.
womb as the same thing. They're
Exactly.
that's the primordial phallus, I think it's called.
Mm-hmm.
And then it either grows into a clitoris or it grows into a penis. So I think people often sort of alternate those terms, if like with whatever feels more comfortable for them. But that's not neutral.
Yeah. Also, I feel like it really depends how, dysphoric you are about your genitalia.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't mind, your genitalia being called like your anatomical parts, I guess. Like, a penis being a penis, a vagina being a vagina. If you're okay with that, then, go for it. Like, have fun, yes.
Yeah. I did date a trans guy who preferred to just say front hole and back hole, which are not very sexy terms and
No.
also probably are hashtag problematic. Please don't call me out on this. I didn't do it. I didn't decide on that. But like that's what he was more comfortable with, and he loved getting fucked, so it was important to specify.
Which hole?
Yeah. Um, it's important for anyone to specify, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, one way to talk about sex is to talk about fucking, saying you want to, I want you to fuck me. I mean, this is when it's like sexy, right? Fuck me. Is I feel like fuck me usually refers to penetration. Like sex is more than penetration, but if you're saying like fuck me, you want someone to penetrate you. I mean, by all means, like create your own language. Like obviously, there are a lot of different scenarios in which to talk about these things, because you want to, when you have a sexual partner, there's a point where you want to just sit down together and talk about sex,
Yeah.
without it necessarily leading to sex or being like a major turn on or anything like that. And you just sometimes you'll need to just talk about it, or maybe before you have sex you want to talk about it in very unsexy terms, and you may want to say then what your sexy terms are that you prefer, because it may be that there are certain words that you just hate. I think a lot of people have words that just don't feel right for them, and then when you actually get down to business, there's a very different vocabulary, so you can establish that vocabulary beforehand. Is this neutral? Some trans girls will refer to their phallus as a strapless. It's not their strap-on, it's their strapless. And some trans girls use strap-ons and they're strapless. So
That's nice, yeah. It can also be a pleasant thing, right? Talking about, sex with your partner before sex, like having dinner and eating spaghetti and slurping that spaghetti and, asking like, would you slurp me like this?
Kitty, how are you eating spaghetti?
Or, watching flowers and being like, hey, I want you to touch, my flower bud. Like, let's call, my genitals my flower bud or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, you can make up a word that's just for you and your partner
Yeah,
as
exactly,
well.
exactly.
And you can name it like Brian or whatever, just be like, so then Kitty didn't laugh at that, that's okay. But like, I mean, if you call your genitals Brian, I think that could lead to some hilarity during sex. And laughter's always good during sex.
Of
But you
course,
can make
yes.
up this terminology that's just for you and that person, and it doesn't have to be universal. It can just be so you two can communicate.
Exactly.
That's what's important.
Exactly.
Or you three, even. You might.
Yeah, I love laughter during sex. It just, if you're having fun, if you're enjoying yourself, why don't you as well just, have a laugh? I feel like porn makes it so rigorous, and to just have like sex and be like and no one laughs, or like no one, is pleasant or some.
Yeah, if you can't have a laugh with your partner, then you're not really having a good sexual relationship with them. Like at some point, you should be able to laugh during sex. I think it can also be very sexy to have sex where like there's not a lot of laughter, because if you want it intense, you can like have a really intense fuck, and that's great. But you should be able to laugh, especially sex can be quite ridiculous. Let's be honest. You end up in the most ridiculous positions. You're like upside down emotionally. You're in such a bizarre place. You're in a very particular headspace. You can get so far outside of your world, and the things you say to each other, it can all actually just be quite funny.
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to laugh at that, because it's not serious. It is fun. The whole point is that you're sharing pleasure with someone, and part of pleasure is being able to laugh.
Exactly.
So, Kitty, I was reading an article the other day which I found really interesting, which is on this topic of sex and dating. The article is called "The Ins and Outs of Topping as a Trans Girl" from Vice by Ceci Kuwabara Blanchard. And so here's a quote from the article that I found particularly intriguing.
Yes.
Tops are sometimes assumed to have no sexual boundaries, says Grace, referencing her own experiences topping with her, quote, Swiss Army knife pussy, otherwise known as a penis. According to the magenta mohawked power dyke, bottoms often expect tops to give without question, while the penetration of the bottom warrants a check-in. This suggested imbalance is, of course, ridiculous. It's not like the bottom's consent is the only thing that's here, Grace says. When you imagine that, then my actions are only in accordance with your consent. This reduction reinforces rape culture. Ignoring the vulnerability that comes with topping cements the idea that a receiving partner is passive. And I find that just really interesting. I think, the global perspective on trans women's sexuality is that we're kind of expected to top.
Are we, though?
You don't think so?
That trans women are expected to top?
I think so.
Really? No.
Guys don't want you to fuck them. You gotta mix, maybe.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people that wanted to hook up with me wanted, to just stop me. I feel like that's the majority of guys.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's sort of a diverse experience. I think when it comes to sort of fetishizing trans women's sexuality, there is often this. I mean, in my opinion, it does seem like guys, straight guys in particular, they want to suck your dick and they want to get fucked by you. It can be very phallocentric, if you will.
Yeah, I remember this one guy who wanted to be like submissive. Yeah, I do remember this one guy.
But I find it particularly...
Sorry to pardon. And he had this like fantasy about like specifically a trans woman fucking him. Like he would watch porn where with a dominatrix trans woman.
Yeah, there's definitely
that's
an audience for that. Yeah,
it's trending. I'm one of them.
So what I find particularly interesting about this is that women are generally perceived to be the ones who, I think, whose consent is more important. I mean, I think the way that rape culture is framed is that kind of women are to some degree the victims of rape and men are the perpetrators.
Yeah.
And the way that people perceive trans women, I mean, especially... I mean, there's the polar ends, aren't there? There's sort of the queer inclusive perspective on trans women, and then there's the sort of TERF perspective on trans women, where trans women are really men and all men are rapists. So what trans women are trying to do by being sexual at all is to rape women. And yeah, I feel that I have some... This feels familiar to me, this idea that like trans women's consent is, or just generally like the top's consent is less important because the person being penetrated is the potential victim and the person penetrating. I think there's a common public perception that you can't be raped by being forced to penetrate someone. So the consent of the person essentially with the penis or the person penetrating is seen as less important, and where trans women kind of end up straddling this line of like where we generally see the rapist versus the rape victim. I don't know, this resonates with me.
It does, yes.
I find it generally quite intimidating what women will think of my sexuality, because this idea, this radical feminist idea that trans women are essentially rapists, I find that quite daunting. And like my relationship to women is definitely affected by the like pressure to like, I don't know, for my sexuality to be neutered, which in all honesty, the estrogen does that. I think discourse can have, I don't know, for me, discourse does absolutely have an effect on my sort of how I view myself. And I, I listen to the TERF stuff. I read it because I want to be informed and I want to be a good person, honestly. I do my best. We're all striving to be the best people that we can be. And I want to hear other people's voices and I don't want to write them off. But I think it has a pretty negative effect on me. And this insistence, and I sometimes have these moments where I'm just thinking, so they reckon I'm a rapist, but I haven't raped anyone. So how do I like reconcile? Like I'm trying to like listen and I'm trying to take what they're saying and absorb it, but like I really don't seem to be a rapist.
No. Yeah, I don't find it really helpful to listen to TERFs. So unlike you, I don't go and read and watch or
Well, maybe it's a BDSM thing. Like I'm a bit of a masochist. So like I read TERF ideology about how I'm a bad person just to hurt myself. It's kink, really. When I get to see, this is totally on topic with the episode topic, right? Okay, that's all we have time for today. Thank you so much, Kitty, for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
It's good to stay in contact in these quarantined, social, isolated times. Thank you for listening to the very first episode of Trans Uncensored. This podcast is produced by Društvo Kvartir. We decided to launch this because at the moment we're not able to do trans meetups, but so in the meantime, we'll try and provide a little bit of content to keep you guys feeling connected. If you have any questions you'd like us to explore on future episodes, you can send them either directly to us or via the Kvartir Tumblr, which is društvokvartir.tumblr.com, and you can send it anonymously on there. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.